You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge.
For the New Jack City. Bum,
It's a cold winter night in the city of New Orleans. Robert Trackling is steering his two-door black Nissan Sentra east across the city when Juan, Short Dog Smith, whom is sitting in the back seat, would tell the other two passengers what was about to go down. All the men in the car, for the exception of Trackling, were members of the Cutthroat Posse, a crew that for several years that had been terrorizing the St. Thomas Project along with other areas of the city. Two of the men, Danielle Fat Bannister, age 20 at the time, and Kentad Buckle Phillips, age 21 at the time, sat in the car holding choppers with banana clips. Short Dog, age 20 at the time, was clutching a 5-inch barrel nickel-plated and chrome Ruger with a 15-round magazine that he had gotten from Fat. The serial number for the Ruger was 303-25147. This is important for later in the story. Out of the four men, only Short Dog knew where they were going. Juan had picked a target and was directing the 18-year-old Trackley alone in the state tent. Anxious to go with the move, Short Dog, with excitement in his voice, would say, "This dude got that work. This dude got at least 20 grand in dummy money just laying around. This is gonna be a quick lick." The time was around 8 o'clock on Saturday, February 4th of 1995. The dude in question was Andre White, aka Dre, age 30 at the time. Per Short Dog's instructions, Robert would take Downman exit and head towards Morrison Road. Robert would cruise slowly as Short Dog searched for the address. As the men would get closer, Short Dog would say, "Slow down, right here. That's the house." The two-story brick house at 8130 Morrison Road was where Andre lived with his girlfriend, the owner of the home, Tangi Thompson, along with her 3-year-old son, Devin. Devin was the only son of Benny Thompson, a former member of the New Orleans Saints, Kansas City Chiefs, and in 1994, captain of the Cleveland Browns special teams. After 6 years of marriage, Benny and Tangi had divorced in July of 1994. By then, Dre had moved in with Tangi. Benny, in the past, threatened Tangi on several occasions about having a hustler around his son. The chickens had come home to roost.
Devil's chickens coming back home to roost.
On this winter night in February, two men, Short Dog and Buckle, were carrying heaters and casing Tangi's house for signs of life. Upon realizing that no one was home, Short Dog would have Robert drive them to the Glow and Shine detail shop that Dre owned. They were looking for Tangi's car, the white Lexus that Dre always drove. There was no white Lexus in sight at the detail shop. It would now be 8:30 p.m. when the men would swing back to the house on Morrison. Once back at the crib, Short Dog and Buckle scouted around the house and hopped back into the whip. Frustrated, Short Dog would say, "Man, we gotta pull it off another time. Ain't nobody in here." As Robert was about to drive away, he would glance back at the 8130 Morrison Road address and see a light flick on in the garage. He backed the Sentra down the driveway of the house, blocking it in. Juan, Fat, and Buckle hopped out of the whip armed and wearing gloves and swept up the drive. As Andre White was about to get in his 4Runner, Devin was walking around the back of the vehicle to the passenger side. Fat would approach and walk Andre back to the house. Buckle would pick up Devin and follow them inside. Short Dog will close the garage door behind them. Robert, who allegedly did not enter the home, will move his car away from the driveway behind some bushes and cut the engine, turning the lights off. As he waited alone in the dark, 20 minutes or 30 minutes would pass. Meanwhile, Fat, Buckle, and Short Dog be inside tearing up the crib, looking for work and money. They would turn up the sound of the TV in the family room where they were holding their 3 hostages. The ski mask that they had taken with them would never be worn. Wouldn't be long before the garage door would begin to raise with Buckle behind the wheel of the 4Runner, backing it out. The carnage would begin immediately after. Everyone in the home would be deleted. Upon arriving to the scene, police would find 14 9mm shell casings around the victims. Before the NOPD would arrive, Short Dog, Fat, and Buckle would leave the scene in the 4Runner. Driving away, they would hit the lights on the 4Runner, hopping out to make their escape in the Sentra. Short Dog was bragging over the way he smashed Andre. Going back and forth with Fat, he would say, "Did you see that boy head when I hit him?" Fat didn't like that one bit and would argue with Short Dog, telling him, "Man, you hit the woman and chow more than you hit the dude. It would turn out to be a failed lick. Andre didn't have nothing, no work, no $20,000 in dummy money, as Short Dog had stated earlier. The men would drop Short Dog off at his girlfriend's house on their way back to the Thomas. Short Dog would hand the Ruger back to Fat. After the smoke cleared, Benny Thompson would be the lone suspect in the slayings, almost from the start. Even though Glow and Shine had been under surveillance for 3 months, authorities would not link the homicide to drugs. Police had no material evidence placing Benny or anyone else at the scene of the crime, not so much as a fingerprint. But Benny had those 2 weights around his neck the cops looked for in suspects, motive and opportunity. Benny would not make his own case any better. He would be caught lying to them dicks, blowing his alibi. For months, Benny lived in dread of a telephone call from his lawyers telling him that a warrant had been issued for his arrest on the charges. There is no bail, only handcuffs. Benny would allegedly learn about the incident late on the day after it would happen. When questioned by the NOPD, Benny would hide the fact that he owned a 9. Meanwhile, homicide detectives began interviewing people who had known Benny, Tangi, and Andre. A section of the confidential report compiled over the next week would tell Benny and Tangi's turbulent relationship, Benny's threats against Tangi's life, and a confrontation that Benny had with Tangi and Andre at a club 10 months earlier. Benny would admit in a deposition in March of '94, connected with his divorce case, that he had threatened to delete Tangi, seeking a temporary restraining order against him. Tangi alleged Benny had once physically attacked her. The story would break at the worst of times. February 10th of 1995, Benny's 32nd birthday, the day before the funeral, the New Orleans Times-Picayune would lead its front page with an article relating to the threats and the alleged abuse. The 4-column headline would read, "Crushed Ex-Wife Claimed Benny Thompson Threatened Her." At 400 mourners gathered at Greater St. Stephen Full Gospel Baptist Church the next day, Benny will be crying hysterically. Benny will finally give the police a sworn statement on February 13th, but it would only sink him further into trouble. Benny would go on to say that he was home alone on the night of the slaying, and telephones could bear witness to his alibi, as he had sworn before. He would also not mention owning the 9. The lawyers had been approached in late March by one of their street sources and told in some detail what had happened on Morrison Road. The lawyers had shared this intelligence with the police. In addition, 1 month after the Tangi and Andre slayings, 5 people had been massacred in a small house invasion on North Roman Street. Then, on May 6th, came the turning point. At 8:30 p.m., a 13-year-old girl wearing a gold chain had just left a snowball stand in New Orleans' uptown area. When a rig ran out, would pull up next to her on the street. A man would hop out of the car and reach for her necklace. When the girl would pull back, he would hit her in the neck. The car would eventually speed away. A few minutes later, police in a squad car spotted the Grand Am and began a high-speed chase that lasted roughly about 45 minutes. A pursuing policeman would see a blicky being tossed from the window of the passenger seat. The trailing officer would stop and pick up the weapon. It was a 9mm Ruger, nickel and chrome, with a 5-inch barrel, and the serial number would be 3032547. When the fleeing car was finally stopped by the police, among those arrested were the driver, Robert Trackling, and the man who had hit the girl and tossed the blicky, Danielle Fat Bannister. There are so many 9s and so many crushings in New Orleans, 365 people crushed in '95, that no one thought to match the marking from Fat's Ruger with those found on Morrison Road 3 months earlier. In May, while the Ruger was being held as evidence for the trials of Robert and Fat, the girl would live. The assailants would be found guilty of attempted crushing and attempted armed robbery in July of 1996. Meanwhile, as Robert was locked up, he would be running EPs to his cellmate, Eric Rogers. One of those EPs would be the slayings of Tangi, Devin, and Andre. Eric Rogers would go with his move on Robert. Fat's Ruger would then be sent to ballistics. Spent shells from it would match those recovered from those on Morrison Road. Robert, who was unaware of these developments, would be questioned by homicide detectives on June 1st and asked what he knew about the Morrison Road slayings. Robert would confess, naming all 3 accomplices. On June 6th, New Orleans Police Superintendent would announce Benny Thompson had been eliminated as a suspect. By July 9th, all 4 suspects, Fat, Buckles, Short Dog, and Robert, were in prison on 3 charges, each of first-degree and aggravated burglary. In December of '96, with Robert testifying against him, Short Dog was convicted of the triple crushing and sentenced to death. This verdict will come after Short Dog had been convicted and sentenced to life for the North Roman Street slaughter. Word on the street, there was a connection between these two crimes. Robert was sentenced to 15 years in prison for manslaughter in the Morrison Road slayings. Fat and Buckle pleaded not guilty, claiming they were not even on Morrison Road. At trial, jurors in New Orleans were sentenced Buckle to life in prison with the deletions of Tangi Thompson, Devin Thompson, and Andre White. Although Buckle did not pull the trigger that deleted the three, he would be found guilty for his role in orchestrating and executing the plan. The jury would announce its verdict about 9:30 p.m. on a Friday night after 2.5 hours of deliberation. Danielle Bannister, aka Fat, would ultimately end up pleading guilty, receiving a life sentence. Nearly 2 decades after 5 people were slain in a bathroom at a house on North Roman Street, Juan Smith pleaded guilty after a long day of jury selection for a retrial in a case that the U.S. Supreme Court shipped back to Orleans Parish when it overturned Smith's 1996 conviction on 5 counts. Smith, 39, waived any delays, and criminal district judge Frank Marullo immediately sentenced him to 2 consecutive 40-year prison terms just before 9 p.m. The deal means Smith, who has spent the past 19 years behind bars, will remain in prison for at least another 2 decades under good time laws that were more generous to offenders when he was originally convicted. The plea brought to a sudden end a first-degree case that shocked the city in 1995. Then later left the Orleans Parish District Court's attorney's office smarting from the high court's ruling that prosecutors had failed to turn over key evidence in the case. The plea came after more than 9 hours of jury selection with a full jury not seated. Even before Marullo called for a jury pool, Monday morning, Smith's public defenders and prosecutors with District Attorney Leon Canazero's office were poised to strike a deal with public defender William Boggs and Assistant DA Bobby Freeman, presenting the same guilty pleas to Marullo shortly after 10 a.m. But Marullo refused to allow discussion of an agreed-upon sentence as part of the deal. "I'm not letting the state or you sentence him. That's my prerogative," Marullo balked at Boggs' I'll decide. The deal was shelved then, and Marullo called for the jurors as Smith, who spent 16 years on death row, sat watching in a dog suit and tie. Late Monday, jurors had been initially selected to hear evidence in a case in which Smith forced 5 counts of first degree. He was the only person convicted of smashing Willie Leggett, Shalita Russell, James Jackson, Ian Jackson, and Robert Simmons in the Roman Street Massacre. Smith's first trial in 1996 ended with convictions on all 5 counts, but the jury refused to sentence him. Because of that decision, Canazero's office would not again seek the death penalty. The U.S. Supreme Court overturned the guilty verdict 16 years later on an 8-1 vote in a harsh rebuke of prosecutors' failure to give Smith's defense attorney initial statements about an eyewitness, Larry Boatner, who first told the police he couldn't identify the shooter, then later fingered Smith. Some of the high court justices wagged their fingers at Canazero's office for even bothering to defend the failure, which took place during former longtime district attorney Larry Connick's tenure. Another jury, after hearing evidence against Smith from the Roman Street Massacre, sentenced him to death after convicting him in a separate triple crushing that took place a month earlier in a Roman Street crushing spree. In that attack on Morrison, the jury convicted Smith of crushing former Saints player Benny Thompson's wife, Tangi Thompson, their 3-year-old son, Devin Thompson, and Tangi Thompson's boyfriend, Andre White. Marullo threw out Smith's sentence in the Morrison Road case, but kept intact the guilty verdict. Smith's resentencing in that case remained pending Monday, even after other attorneys fight to get the conviction overturned on similar arguments of misconduct by the prosecutors. As part of the plea deal Monday night, Canazero's office agreed not to again seek the death penalty for Smith in the Morrison Road conviction. Smith, for his part, agreed to dismiss a lawsuit against the DA's office. A significant portion of the jury selection process focused on whether potential jurors recall either of the bloody melee, which were covered predominantly in media, or had learned about them later. While some jurors acknowledged hearing of the case, the question did not appear in seating the jury.